Want to learn to sleep better? Want to sleep more and more easily? Join us to learn how. And if you fall asleep during this video, that means we were successful. Kinda.
Thank you, Frank. And I have a feeling we might hit discussion today by virtue of the fact that this is a topic that every time we even mention it, people are like, yeah, we want a session on it. We want a session on it. And so as I came to put together the presentation for this, I realized a couple of things that there's so much that I want to say about sleep, which is the first pillar of health that we're going to touch into. And there's still not enough time to we could do the whole month on any one of these slides. But we're gonna do 1 hour on everything. So, please let it be w uh, there's a lot to share. I shared with Frank up front, and I'll share it with you as well, that depending on how long it takes me to get through it, because 'cause I'd really rather get the information to you than have a practice period, but I will encourage you to take a nap or go to bed early tonight to
What
help
what
support
about during the
your
class?
practice with sleep. You can do that too because it's recorded and you can watch it on YouTube. So please, let's see how we get through it. So I just wanted to give initially an overview about pillars of health and a bit of a disclaimer about how we should think about it. And first, it's that a lot of times, especially from the perspective of Western medicine, we see this body as compartmentalized, and especially with anything that has to do with the above the neck, basically, whether it's teeth or mind or eye, uh, they're separated from the rest of the body. And as those of you in the United States, I don't know if we have people outside of the United States, but know that these are, you even have to insure them separately and have different coverage for all of these different body parts, but or for your mental health or any of that. But really, what we are is an integrated whole. And as much as any particular thing, illness or disease that happens in the body affects one part and manifests in one part, more than likely there are not more than likely, most definitely there are other parts in the body that are compensating and supporting the situation that's happening in the area that's in distress. And so as we think about what the pillars of health are, I want you to think about that in terms of that no one aspect of well-being can carry the burden or make up for like major deficiencies that are created by the environment, by the society, familial in the family, epigenetics, that is genes that have turned on or off, that you've inherited. All of these play a role, and those are things that we're not even gonna touch on. But again, kind of expand your view about what it means to have pillars of health that support me. And then I want you to think about what a healthful life actually is for you, because it might look very different than someone else and what they prioritize. So, oftentimes we read these articles online that say 10 ways to improve or to lose weight and 15 ways to manage sleep and, you know, 20 ways to improve your relationship. I think one of the things that we need to think about is what does a meaningful and a healthful life, and I'm distinguishing that from healthy, mean to me? And since it's relative, I want us to make it a real intentional approach to setting that foundation for ourselves. Because more than likely, most of us have gone through life and just let the chips fall where they may. And when we have time, we do certain things. And when we don't have time, we don't, and things to support our health. And so, as I go through this, and I know it's going to be a lot of material that relates to sleep, and the various aspects of sleep, I want you to consider what is just one thing that you can take away in just for this week to do. You don't have to do all of them, and really, I want you to think of it as a slow evolution, because maybe a lot of these things you already have in place for yourself, and that's wonderful. So you can kind of check the boxes on the stuff that are here, and then tweak the ones that maybe need tweaking and add the ones that might be missing. But doing it purposefully and intentionally and slowly, not all at once, because you want to integrate them into your life as it is, and you don't want to end up quitting any of them because you kind of overburdened your daily routine with sleep habits in this case. Any thoughts on this, Frank?
No, because I'm distracted by looking for things. Um, oh no, no, for it's
Sorry.
uh,
Okay.
ditto. Do we even say ditto anymore, or is that such a
Okay.
a boomer thing? Because like, does
Yeah, we
anybody
do.
remember? Okay, so ditto.
Mm,
That's right.
as long as we keep it alive, as long as we keep it alive. So when we think about sleep, um, just an overarching consideration is that scientists don't really know the purpose for why we sleep, why we need as much as we do, but we do know what happens when you can't sleep or when you're sleep deprived. There's even a condition where it's a genetic, very rare genetic condition where by middle age, some gene turns on or off, and all of a sudden you cannot sleep. And what happens very quickly, and it's actually very fatal, is that your blood pressure starts to rise and you have an elevated heart rate and you start having cognitive issues like memory loss and hallucinations. Your muscles start to twitch. So we know that sleep is such an important part of our circadian rhythm, which we're going to talk about, but just about how we live and age and, promulgate in our life, continue with our life. The quality sleep in particular is essential. And science and studies keep on finding that it's so essential. It's as essential as food and water and many other pillars of health, even though we live in a very sleep deprived society. In fact, and I'm going to share this with you all, and we in the chat, and also we will send it if we do send slides. Can't remember if we send them. I think we do. Um, we will send this. It's a PDF because the American Heart Association has a list of what they call life's essential 8, and one of them is good sleep. So sleep patterns have evolved over time. So it used to be in pre-industrial society where the most prominent ex- experience of light was natural light. People would sleep around dusk. We would kind of unwind and sleep. And then around 2 a.m., midnight, they would wake up, even socialize, visit with one another, do some work, and then go back to sleep around 2, 3 a.m. This has changed by virtue of when we started introducing what would you call what we have now? The kind of light we
Always
have, it's
on
like
light.
artificial light. You y'all, please give me some grace today. It's been like a very crazy day. Um, so yeah, now that once we started introducing artificial light into our lives, and we can have light like street lights and indoor lighting, all of a sudden things started to shift. And now all the studies show that what they called that was called biphasic sleep, that really what we need for us modern day people is a full stretch of sleep, which we'll talk about as far as duration. Sleep need changes with age. So as we see little babies and newborns, children need much more sleep than we do. And that's because their brain is still developing. It's building synapses and neurons are flying and, building all sorts of connections. And that all happens in sleep. All that brain growth and activity actually happens when we sleep. And so babies sleep about 18 hours a day on average, whereas adolescents can also sleep about 10 hours a day. And if you think about how the human brain doesn't actually finish fully developing until you're 25, even though we, you know, bookmark adolescence as teen years, it actually stretches pretty far, and the need for sleep it pretty extends far beyond just those teen years. And then as we age, into adulthood, it's about 8 to 10 hours, and then as we age even further, we need less and less sleep. What also happens is that the quality of sleep changes, where when you were younger, you can have deeper sleep states. When you're older, you actually have lighter sleep states, and that all shifts over time. Um, yeah, I think that's all I want to say on this one. Yeah. So as far as sleep cycle, and so when we think about what dictates the sleep cycle, what it's called the circadian rhythm. The circadian rhythm is the process and the ebb and wave of sleep and activity, very much dictated by the light and darkness of the 24-hour cycle. This is where the exposure to blue light that comes from smartphones and televisions and their screen electronic screens comes into play, because when it emits that blue light into your eyes, and it's nighttime, it tricks the mind to think that it's actually daylight. And so the process of producing melatonin in the body is suppressed, and all of a sudden you don't feel so tired and you can't fall asleep. And it kind of perpetuates a cycle. Now, the cycle phases of sleep, there's light, deep sleep, a deeper level of sleep. So there's really 4 stages, and then REM sleep, rapid eye movement. And REM is usually the one that's associated with um, dreaming. And in order to get an ideal amount of sleep, you need about an hour and a half of the deepest sleep and about an hour and a half of REM sleep. And you're gonna cycle through all 4 phases of sleep all through the night. And a lot of the, wearables, nearables, the things that can track sleep actually can catch these based on your heart rate and your breathing, the depth of your breathing. And so they're able to a great amount of they're helpful enough. They're accurate enough to give you an idea of how much you're getting of each of these phases. Now, the most important hours that you should be knocked out, so I'm calling them hours of power, is between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. And this is due to the fact that it's the darkest period of night where you're going to produce the highest amounts of melatonin. And as this melatonin hormone washes over you, it helps in regulating sleep, relaxation, and rejuvenation. So do your best to be asleep during those hours. Going back to the cycle phases and getting that hour and a half of REM and hour and a half of deep sleep, some people need between 7 and 9 hours of sleep to get that. Some people can do it in 4 or 5 hours of sleep. So it and it's not something you can really train yourself to do. It's how your body metabolizes and moves through those sleep stages. So I would say we're going to talk about in a minute about how to start gauging your sleep and figuring out how am I getting enough sleep? So, yeah, so there are people out there that don't need that much sleep, and they're very, very lucky because they have a lot more hours to have fun. The most important piece in terms of maintain to supporting a sleep cycle is consistent sleep schedule. And so what that means is, although we can't always um, decide or set what time we're going to go to sleep, that might be a little hard. It's really important to wake up at the same time every morning. And this is to help your body regulate so that it knows the hours of wakefulness, what hours of that it's going to kind of start shutting down, and then of course fall asleep. Okay. So you might have heard of this term. It's called sleep hygiene. And really, in the same way that you have a personal hygiene protocol that you abide by, showering, brushing teeth, brushing hair, whatever it involves. Here too, there's a lot of hints and tips on how to maintain very good sleep hygiene. So as I mentioned, the amount that we need varies to each person and by our age, because as we age, we don't need as much. But it's really important to wake up at the same time each morning to help create a rhythm to your circadian clock. And it's really important because of what those screens do to your melatonin production and what it informs your brain that it's still light out, that it doesn't need to power down. To avoid electronic screens for about an hour before sleep. Cool, dark, quiet bedroom is also a really important aspect of sleep. You want it to be the research is showing that you want it to be cool, and this is due to the fact that cool temperature your part of the circadian rhythm is that, over the course of the day and into the evening, your body temperature actually starts to drop, and when you're actually, sleeping, your body really wants to be a little cooler than it was during the day. So an external temperature of about 65 to 67 degrees is ideal for an adult. Um, Children and babies need just a few degrees higher. But they can, like, if you're maintaining an ambient temperature in the whole house, they can, be supported by like extra bedding or extra clothing. Let's see. And it needs to be quiet. I know a lot of us think about, or some people use white noise machines to help them. And while that's helpful to maybe get the mind to focus on something in the way that we do with mindfulness, a lot of times that sound can be disruptive over the course of the evening and it'll actually wake the person out of the deep sleep and the REM sleep. So it's really important to train your body to fall asleep in a quiet space. And of course, darkness is very important by virtue of what I just shared, that the darker the room is, the more melatonin you'll produce and the healthier that is for the rejuvenation of the body while it sleeps. It's actually, for those that are interested, there's actual dark retreats for those that are meditators where they'll be in a um, light deprived room for a week or 10 days. And you actually get a flush of melatonin over the course of that time. And people use that. And what happens with that, whether it's hallucinations or euphoria or whatever arises, to use that as their focal anchor in the way that we use our focal anchor to be our breathing. They use that as their focal anchor. That's for advanced people. The other thing that maybe we don't consider is the comfort of our bed and our bedding, the bed size. I know I was presenting at one point on mindfulness and to a group and it came up It was for people that were homeless and they were being given housing, temporary housing to transition into full housing. One of the men stood up and, he asked the question. I had just said it in passing, like sleep is really important. Don't discount it. And he said, well, he was a big man. He was about 6'3", 6'4". And he goes, how am I supposed to get restful sleep in a short twin? I'm tossing and turning all night. And so I just turned the question over to the executive director because most of these programs, right, they have these standard beds that they buy and they don't think about, what kind of bed um, would be most comfortable for different sized people. And I was on this in preparation for this, I was on the Sleep Foundation's website to kind of get more information, and they have a sleep test, a sleep quality test. And actually, I was happy to see that one of the questions that they asked is, what kind of bed do you sleep on? Is it a twin, a double, a queen, a cal king, a king? So that was kind of interesting. So considering the firmness, because we all vary, the kind of bedding that you're using, and any supports. Like there's a lot of people that swear by a body pillow, or there's these little triangle divoted pillows that you can put between your knees if you're a side sleeper. So consider these kinds of things to help support you as you sleep. Okay. So this one is kind of my favorite things that I put into play every single day. And that is issues with sleep, digestion, metabolism, and sleep aids. Mm, One of the things that the research supports is that you don't consume any food 3 to 4 hours before sleep. I would even say, depending on what you're eating, so fruit, you metabolize within a half an hour. And other things, it takes a couple of hours. Meat, for example, will take 6, 7 hours to metabolize. So I would say, depending on the food that you're going to consume, I would just avoid it anywhere. I personally avoid it about 5 to 6 hours before I sleep because I don't want it to disrupt my sleep. And you can experiment with that. See what happens if it's 3 hours and then just one night, stop eating 5, 6 hours before you intend to sleep and see, does it affect your sleep at all? Hydrate before sleep. And I know this one can be controversial because people are like, oh, but I wake up to use the restroom. I'll wake up to need to urinate. And yes, if you can also do this all throughout the day, hydrate really well. It doesn't have to be right before sleep, but just make sure that you're well hydrated because you're going to spend those 7, 8, 9 hours without any water. So do your best to stay hydrated all throughout the day and then maybe have a few sips of water before you go to sleep. Caffeine should be avoided as much as 10 hours before sleep. Caffeine is a central nervous stimulant, and so it metabolizes in your body very slowly. It has a half-life of about 4 to 6 hours, and for some people, the half-life is 9 hours, and that means it takes 9 hours for half of that caffeine to work its way out of your body. So that other half is joining you in sleep when you go into sleep. So if you need the caffeine, make sure it's done in the morning, definitely not after 12 p.m. if you're going to sleep at, let's say, 10 p.m. Alcohol. This was really interesting in that the recommendation is to avoid drinking alcohol at least 3 to 4 hours before sleep. But when you go to bed with alcohol in your system, you're likely to experience more deep sleep initially, but as it starts wearing off, metabolizing, you're going to get less REM sleep than usual. Um, and since your body has metabolized much of the alcohol, you're going to start getting into those light sleep stages more and more over the course of the night. So it really disrupts the whole remember we were talking about you cycle through light, deep, and REM sleep all night long. It really disrupts it in that you end up staying in that light sleep stage for too long. And what you really need is that hour and a half of deep sleep and that hour and a half of REM sleep. And then I wanted to speak a little bit about sleep aids, vitamins, and supplements. There's so much out there with regards to this. What I would say is definitely read up on whatever you choose, because this can be a presentation all on its own. And definitely, if you're on medications or have any sort of medical condition, I would run any vitamin or supplement or sleep aid with my doctor before I were to adopt it. And then I wanted to talk about naps. So, naps. So, first off, naps are really good for you. If you're a healthy person, they show that it improves cognitive performance, it enhances physical performance for those that are like athletic. But the time of your nap is very important so it doesn't disrupt your evening sleep cycle. And for those that have other medical conditions that are napping long periods in the middle of the day, it's really important to check in with your doctor to see if there's something else going on, because extended naps are associated with other health issues, including emotional health issues like anxiety and depression, among many, many other physical uh, conditions. So, when do you time the nap? You need to, again, considering the circadian rhythm cycle, there's a natural dip in energy that happens around midway through the day, around 2, 3 p.m. If you feel the need and have the capacity and the circumstances that allow you to take a nap, it's really worthwhile to take that time to rest your mind and your eyes and your body. The ideal amount of time is around 30 minutes or under. But if you sleep over 30 minutes, to let it go to 90 minutes or 120 minutes, because and you don't wanna do anything in between that time. So it's either 30 minutes or under or 90 to 120 minutes. And again, this comes back to the circadian rhythm, because you wanna go it takes about 30 minutes to get through one cycle of the, um, sleep cycle to get refreshed. So if you take a power nap for 20 minutes, you will feel kind of re-energized, but if you take one for, like, 90 minutes, you'll kind of feel, like, more wakeful, but not necessarily that pump of energy that you get with a shorter nap. But if you stay in in that in between, like, if you wake up, like, let's say after 60 minutes, what happens is you experience this thing that's referred to as sleep inertia, and it causes your it causes your your processing to deteriorate. You're actually not getting a full cycle. You're cutting the cycle of sleep in the midst of it, and so it's too much. It's you're at a deep sleep. You're cutting it off too soon. You're not allowing it to go the full cycle. On the other side of things, if you sleep too long, if you take longer naps, it will leave you feeling kind of groggy because you'll need to wake up from the sleep, and you're just gonna sometimes it even feels disorienting because it's overextended its period. So a lot still remains in terms of researching the benefits and the limitations, disadvantages of naps and including nighttime sleep, and truly to admit, like, how the frequency and length of naps affects the overall well-being, and so there's various things that still need to be looked into, but just stick to the rule of if it's under 30 minutes, you're good. If you happen to push over, make sure it goes to 90 minutes, no more than 120 minutes, so 2 hours. You're gonna have to set an alarm to make sure you stay within that. So, sleeping tips and good habits. Uh, the important thing is to always go to bed only when you're tired. You wanna create an association with your bed with just sleep or sex. You don't want to have too many things going on in your bed, like watching TV or scrolling on your phone, because you're there is a lot to muscle memory and habit memory, and you want to really isolate what the purpose of this bed is for. And you're going to keep it cool, you're going to keep it dark, and you're going to keep it quiet. So mm, only go to bed when you feel tired. And if you happen to not fall asleep within the first 20 minutes of getting into bed, get up and go to the couch, go to a chair. Don't linger in the bed and build that frustration again. You don't want to create that habit and association of frustration when it comes to sleep. Go and read a book, do something analogish, a Sudoku or something, like not screens, and see, or stretching, and then come back and see if you'll fall asleep and give it another 20 minutes. And just, I know that's hard to do sometimes when you're just laying there, you just want it to happen. You think it'll just arise, but really a lot of times we have to help our body get there. I said about how the uses of the bed. Also, we need to manage stress. Of course, the majority of what we do in this series is resilience and mindfulness practices. These are very helpful in managing stress. But when we think about stress, there's familial stress, there's work stress. In preparation for a presentation that I was doing, I noted on mindfulness and leadership, there were studies out there that were saying that if you have a toxic boss, it actually affects your sleep. And that's not hard to believe, but the fact that that it's out there and we recognize it. So, you know, doing your best to manage this, and it happens on many levels, not just the general stress of work, but many other reasons where that could happen in terms of stress from a work leader. But we just have to find ways to manage our stress, because that, again, all of this interplays. There's nothing that's not integrated into our overall health. Everything affects everything. So we have to find a way to negotiate and manage and mitigate stressful situations that are inevitable, really, in life. Mm. It's really important to help with the circadian rhythm, to get that 30 minutes of natural light exposure in the morning. So if you have a pet, walking them, or just taking a walk in the morning, just to let that, and don't wear sunglasses, definitely not polarized sunglasses. Let the light come into your eyes so that it can give the right signals to the brain. Exercise is really important, about 20 minutes a day. It could be anything at all. It doesn't have to be anything formal. It could be dancing. It could be movement. And we're going to talk about movement, mindful movement, in a future session. I think the next session. So definitely getting movement in every single day. Nicotine. So stopping smoking, or keeping away from secondhand smoke is very important. Nicotine is a stimulant, and exposure to nicotine smoke has been associated with a range of sleeping problems, um, like affecting sleep quality. And so if you can avoid it yourself and stay away from secondhand smoke, that's very important. The other tip is to keep a sleep diary where as you make these little changes, or first start off with a night where it's just baseline, exactly how you usually do things, and start noting time of sleep, when you ate, all the things that we said, when you drank, what you drank, if you drank caffeine or alcohol, and then sleeping, and then noting in the morning what time you woke up and what was the quality of that sleep cycle. And then tweaking it one by one, and just journaling to see how it changes. And it's also helpful if you are experiencing any sort of sleep issue, to maintain a sleep diet. It'll really help in working with your clinician or physician so that you can go over it with them. Sleep tracking there's so much sleep tracking technology out there, whether it's apps, whether it's the external hubs, whether it's wearables. They're all tracking. And like I said, the research has been showing that they're pretty good at tracking it, even though they're not tracking like They're not putting nodes on your head and actually tracking to what the depth of your sleep is. That's on your heart rate. Sorry, guys. It's based on your heart rate and your breathing rate. Okay, so that was it. I would love to hear either in the chat or just sharing whether you feel there's anything here that you can adopt in terms of, or something other than what I shared that you find very helpful. Because as we build this community, we're here to learn from one another. So share whatever you've got, and if I didn't mention it, share it so we can get it out, so we can learn from one another.